They will. Yeah. And the first of all, Health Incorporated in Colorado.
Interesting.
Wasn't the navigation system in the car?
They tried to send you to Colorado?
Send me to Colorado.
Whoops. We are? Oh, the Virtual Health? Or Doppelganger Company? Looks like we were right about that 15% no-show. Perfect. Okay. Can you follow me out?
What's up, everybody? Hopefully you know you're an Angular men. If this is your first time here, welcome. Our Wi-Fi stuff is right up here in case you missed it. Super secure. My name's Will. I send you all the annoying emails and need a haircut. So, May Meetup. Sponsors, we'll get that out of the way first. Virtual has this lovely office that I work at and other people work at. Talk to me if you'd like to work at it also. Don here from Bloom Health is going to talk about how awesome they are for giving us food and beer tonight.
All right, so I'm a developer at Bloom, and so what we do is we help employees choose like benefits and health insurance and try to make the best selection for them as possible through like a survey and just like a great like member experience. So we are a Grail stack, we do Angular, a little bit of Node, sprinkling the Node, and so yeah, if you're interested, just contact me. Put a couple of cards on the table there, and we're hiring. Thanks.
Thanks, Don. Anybody else want to announce any hirings or looking for work, independent contractor people? Welcome to. Cool.
We're looking for an intern.
Okay.
Over at Turnkey Corrections in Hudson, Wisconsin. You can go to our website, twbending.com or turnkeycorrections.com. Looking for starting out hourly type thing, see how you fit.
Sweet. Turnkey Corrections?
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Object Partners is always hiring.
Thank you, John.
Yep.
John works at Object Partners. Talk to him. We need presenters. There's no one signed up for next month. So if you would like to come spiel about something cool up here where I stand, please do. Otherwise, we can have a hack night. I think that would be cool. Other people think that would be cool. I don't know, just general show of hands. Would people think that would be cool? Yes. Sweet. Okay. Or like we could do a fishbowl too, but you know, it's all good. Other announcements. I don't see Mark Grabansky here today, but on his behalf, I'll say that he runs a Savage called Front-End Masters. And I believe in June they're doing a like React, Knockout, Backbone, Ember, Angular, Face-Off Day thing. That sounds pretty cool. So check out frontendmasters.com if you want to check that out. He's one of our sponsors giving away a subscription to his online training service. I don't think I have anything else to spiel about. Anybody else? General announcements, Angular shit you saw recently. I saw Famous is doing some Angular integration. I want to check that out. But
Anyone want to take a bridge to Europe yet?
No, I have not. They were
Laughter, I'm guessing that's in the middle.
they did a real weird like release schedule for the tickets, didn't they?
I have no idea.
Yeah, they were like -8 hours behind.
Yeah, it's weirdos. Okay, I'll open it up to lightning talks then. If you want to give a lightning talk, come on up here. I have my little HDMI dongle you can plug into. John?
Again, I'll do it again. We got for,
Here you go.
either or.
Is it caught?
So I'm not sure how many people. My name's John Colvin. I'm not sure how many people came to the last one. Or I think I presented this Angular agility thing I've been working on like a couple months ago, and it's pretty much done now. So just a really quick summary on what it does before I show you the new stuff that it now does. Like essentially, like one big problem I found with Angular that is like, just glaring issue is that like when I want to do validation, like obviously there's form and there's form validation with ng model. Your field has to have an ng model, it has to have a name on it, you have to have a current form, right? And then you can manually hard code every single last validation rule. That to me is like a bunch of code that I don't want to write. So essentially what I did here is this right here, you basically, stuff like this you get for free. So you get like a notification in the corner here. If you click like the magnifying glass, it'll focus the field, which is kind of cool. And then if you start typing like this, so it'll, you start filling stuff in. It has check marks that don't quite align properly. So let's say I fill all the rules, right? Well, let's not even do that. So you're like, okay, what do I have to do to pull this off right on this form? Well, normally with Angular, and this is kind of what I was saying I don't like, is that you have to something like this where you'd have to type out your, say with Twitter Bootstrap, you'd have to type out, okay, I'm doing an email address, put a star on it because it's required, right? And then do all this Twitter Bootstrap markup, right? And then finally, email is required, must be a valid email address. All this code that you're probably copying and pasting from every other last rule that you've created, right? Well, how about instead of that, let's do this instead. Just a really simple, quick, directive-driven DSL, which generates whatever markup that you want. So here, a field group, it's by default, it's got a built-in strategy that says a field group built-in is going to generate Twitter Bootstrap 3 markup. However, you can define your own strategy without modifying the source code to generate whatever you want. And so this right here will generate the label. Since it's required, the strategy also is configured to put a star on it because it's required. It also generates all the validation messages for you. And if I tap like ng min length, max length, whatever on here, it's also going to just automatically right away with no other typing start fulfilling those rules with baked-in messages. I actually got a guy in someone's doing PRs and a Belgian guy's doing PRs, and he's got like the Belgian translations in there, and he's also got it now so that you can configure it from the server, so you can drop your object graph from the server that says this field has these rules, so you don't actually have to declare it in line in HTML. You can actually drop it from the server. So like with .NET, you have data annotations, and Groovy Girls has a very similar concept where you have annotations on your fields which define the validation rules, so you can get the sharing that way. So that's like the basic thing. What I really wanted to present on, so like this form right here that I just showed you is after gzipping is 51% smaller, right? So like you looked at it before and you got all this shit, right? Looks horrible. It's really hard to look at. And then if you switch over, like if I can click here, so after form extensions, it looks like that, right? So it's kind of like distilling your HTML down to what it should be, and it's very customizable, so you can kind of do whatever you want with it. But anyways, what I wanted to show you guys is the advanced stuff. So first off, you see, like I have changes. So this plugs in Angular UI router by default, and also to the download mode event. So if your form is dirty, it's not going to let you navigate away without popping up something, which is really handy, right? It's that common UI paradigm that I've probably coded over and over again like a million times, and I was like, enough, I'm not going to put this on every controller in my application, right? So, so that's what that does. So the more advanced stuff is it does form change tracking. So Angular has the concept of dirty tracking, right? So, but the problem with Angular dirty tracking, so we'll see really quick, is, well, I don't have it here, but if you change a field and then change it back, the form is still dirty. It doesn't do change tracking. So like to me, like something that's very useful is if I change it to like Johnny here, it's changed, right? Because I've changed it, but then I change it back to John again, and it's not changed anymore. So that's extremely powerful to me to actually know, and that's the core mechanism for how the navigate away stuff works, right? Because it says, oh, the form's changed, so I'm not going to let you navigate away. So say you do all this stuff. Let's see. Let me zoom out a little bit here. So it does form change tracking. It also does reset. So it'll reset your form back to its initial state. So say you come on here, and normally, like how most applications work, if you're doing a spot, you're going to have some AJAX, which loads your page. So it has a root scope A is loading, where you can like just have a loading indicator, and that watches for AJAX events occurring. And then finally, like what it does is it doesn't actually start doing the dirty tracking, and it actually does the dirty tracking with ng model. So you don't actually have to put anything else in your code to just get the dirty tracking. It just works for free. Like the Angular way of doing it is to do like a what is it, like an Angular.equals, and then do like an Angular watch with Angular.equals, and then like a JSON serialization, like constantly on every keystroke, which is, in my opinion, is kind of wasteful, right? Because you're literally hashing the entire model every time you do anything, right? And you have to remember to code it. You have to put it in every single controller. It's a pain in the butt. So what this does is just hide an ng model, and it's some fields here, so you can see the fields. And then what it does, so if I'm like on here and I'm like change the age to 12, I can reset change, so now the state of the form is unchanged, right? So that's how, if I navigate away now, it would let me navigate away. So you have programmatic access to all that stuff. And then other than that, like it also will do resets. So something that your users probably want is the ability to reset the form back to its initial state, right? Which is something that you get with HTML forms if you don't have it Angular. So if I click this, and it looks like might be a little thing, but so now it's back to its initial state. There's no AJAX call to repopulate it. It knows what the initial state of all the fields were, so it pops them back in there. But beyond that, so it also works with arrays, so you can tell it explicitly if you have like an object graph that you want it to watch. You can say, watch this object graph, so it doesn't have to work with ng model. Like this array here is not necessarily ng model. So if I come here and I delete the array, it's back to unchanged again on the bottom. So that was kind of interesting. And then finally, like, I'll just fill these in here quick. So I've used this on like a couple projects now, like probably about 100-page single-page app, and just fully implemented across the entire app. And I just dropped it in, and all of a sudden, like all these paradigms are just kind of working across the application with no like work on my part. So it was really cool to just drop it in and have it work. And finally, if I click submit, it also does a little spinner. So if there's a submit form, which will prevent you from resubmitting a form, and it locks the button down and puts a little spinner in there, and that's all configurable. So I don't know, just thought it'd be useful. I found it really useful. Cuts down a lot of the boring stuff, so you can focus on interesting things that you'd rather be doing, and it's kind of interesting to write too. And if you have problems with it, it'll be interesting to do a pull request. So. But yeah, that's it. I don't know if you have any questions. I got a couple of contributors. Now, and about 100 stars on GitHub, and it's coming along. I'm probably going to refactor it here pretty soon to have more unit tests, but way more about directives than I wanted to know.
Thanks, John. Anybody else want to come spiel about something cool that they're doing? You get to be on live internet TV.
See what happened in my HTML5.
Oh, no, you probably want that naked, huh? Or VGA? I have VGA.
That has problems earlier, but still forget to bring it back here.
Yeah, it's just Angular agility. That's just Google that. You can find it.
I tweeted it out from the Angular Event account.
Okay. Yep. And the demo's online. Listed on Heroku, so you can poke around with it if you want.
You got it, Joel? Sweet.
So this was an HTML5 drag and drop that I did present last time. So what I wanted to show you was this time. So I got, you know, the thing was called HTML5 drag and drop. So you can add a new component here. So say add a new G4. There's a new element. So these are all directives. This was the problem that I had coming here last time was I didn't know how to write this as a directive. I figured it out, and thanks to Andrew last time who was here. I don't know if he's here today, but he gave a good direction for me to get started. So you can drag these elements into these areas. These are also configurable from the template, and you can also choose these and delete them as you go. But what I wanted to show you was an update. Is the thing was I did was a directive testing, which was interesting. This took me a while to figure it out. The testing was pretty interesting in the directive. Let's see if I can go to presentation mode. There it goes. It's good. Cool. So this is a drag and drop controller. The directive testing would be, so this is just typically testing the elements on the scope, which is pretty straightforward. You can have a number of cabinets. You can mark these out with the scope. These are pretty straightforward. What I struggled was having a directive. So I have a directive template that I wanted to put it in the memory, in the cache, and then get it out, and then combine it with the scope values, and then mash it together, and then do the testing on that. That was the tricky part. The groundbreaking point for me was this link right here. It's this guy just talked about how this was. So you typically use a template cache, and you get your asset. This is just a plain HTML placements container HTML. So you get that into a template cache, and you get your scope, and this is it. This is the line that makes the magic happen. So you put your template, compile, you pass in your template and your scope, and you put it together, and you hit call digest, and you run this on before each. Then I can now create my scope here. I can create the placement directive. Then I set up an attribute on this one. I can come back and read the element on the label, right? This was pretty cool. So this is like the okay, this is cool. I can really use this. Is really good testing. So this is like real. I can mark values in the scope. I have my template coming with the directive, and I can use all this. So that was I just want to give you an update on that. It's pretty cool. So I'm glad I was able to do that. Let me go back to one of the things I did. So the directive is the DND directive. So this is an attribute. It will be placed in HTML like this. Again, that was Andrew's, who was here last time, mentioned that creating the directive directly on the class, which worked out pretty well. That's the control. There it is. So this is the directive name, CPS DND placement, and that's the definition of this directive, CPS DND replacement. So this is available on GitHub again. The same. I updated the latest updates for this one, but yeah, it's working pretty well. It's an attribute, so you can drag and drop element, whatever you want to compile, and then make it a directive, and then you can change the attributes back and forth. I have a few problems I'm still working on with the. So the way I'm doing it from the main scope to the root scope to the directive scope to the root scope, I'm using events. I'm not sure if that's the right way of doing it. I emit the event and then capture it from the main scope. So I want to pass object attributes back and forth. So that's a little bit of a hack that I've been working with, but maybe there's better ways of doing that. I can't really necessarily set the attribute on the directive directly from the main scope. So there's a couple of things that I still need to work on. This has been also on hold for me. I have other priorities right now, but I just want to give you an update since the last time. So coming here and presenting on your projects, I think is a really good idea. So if you have anything that you have struggling with, I highly come and suggest you come out and take a little stage and show you what you got. I was here and Andrew, really a couple of guys, also good ideas. So just with that, I just wanted to conclude. Anything else? Thanks.
Thanks a lot. Anybody else? Going once, going twice. Okay. Mr. Mark, would you like to take the stage?
What's the name of the meetup, right?
Sorry?
The Wi-Fi.
The Wi-Fi SSID is Meetup. Yep. The password is all lower guest 123.
I got it. Thanks.
Excellently secure password that it is. Oh, just a couple of quick things that I forgot. There's some Angular stickers as well as some Angular MN stickers, and one Ionic sticker that's a little folded that I had in my bag, left over from last time, if anybody wants those. They're right next to the raffle stuff, which, by the way, if you didn't fill out your name and email and stick it in the fishbowl for a raffle prize, that's how you win raffle prizes. We have JetBrains license, a year sub to frontendmasters.com, and month-long Pluralsight trials to give away. So if you want any of that, sneak your way out there and put your name and email in the fishbowl. I think that one's HDMI 1. You might want to drag the dongle up onto the platform a little bit and try and get it set. It's a little finicky sometimes. Price I pay for getting 3-in-1, I think.
Yeah, it's like.
We try the VGA, yeah. That thing takes VGA also, I believe.
Can you take the shade? Can you shake it down?
Oh, yeah. Which one? Well, I guess we won't know until we try.
All of them.
Probably all. Oh, there we go.
Who here has laptops with them? All right, get them out, because I actually had the demos I have, I want to be using during the talk. So if it's not a big deal, bring them out, because I think the more people that will jump in on them, the greater the effect. So I need a VGA key.
You got it?
One of them will work fine with mobile too. If you don't have a laptop on you, don't bother taking your laptop out. But the other one I didn't really. I didn't think about mobile, so I think it'll work with it. All right, let's do this first. Something that something better.
Ta-da! Technology. There's stools too if that's too short. They're out in the kitchen.
All right. Okay. All right. So just while I'm futzing around here, everyone jump over to howamidoing.firebaseapp.com, and I'll explain this one really quickly.
How am I
doing? All one word. All right. Arrangements here.
supposed to be quiet?
Okay, we'll keep this up here.
Oh, I missed the W. That's what's up. I'll tweet it out in a second here, too, as soon as I get it to work. Stop fat fingering the name and such. All right.
Okay, so I think I'll just explain these real quick and I'll jump into the presentation. There's audio on one very short part of the presentation, so hopefully you'll be able to hear it. Okay, so you guys can get the gist of this, I suppose, right? It's real time, obviously. You can see your square turning colors. This was just kind of the first basic example I wanted to come up with for everyone. And this one basically is something that while I'm giving the talk, you can push the up button if you like something, or you think it's interesting, or I'm doing well, and you push the down button if you're completely bored, or you're falling asleep, or you hate something. And then we can check in on it. Someone really hates this already.
What's up down on a phone?
This is the one that I didn't make mobile ready, and someone at work actually mentioned that to me, but I didn't bother. So on the phone, I thought maybe like swiping it up or something. There's a couple different ways you could do it, but the other demo you will be able to do on a phone, but you can at least keep track of it, so you can see if I'm bombing really bad. So we'll check back on this a couple times as I give you the talk.
Is each person a box that sticks around?
Everyone's a box, and yeah, it's all anonymous, but you should be able to refresh and it'll keep track of who you are. And then just over time, it's just changing the opacity based on, you know, you can value 1 through 100, and you just you rail on it. But this is a good example.
That's exactly
Please do not hack this. The experiment will fail if you all dig into the source. Okay, so that's that one. This is the other one. Okay, so this is it's already gotten in here. So this one, if you want to go to Live AMA, so Live Ask Me Anything. This is the more complicated app. This is the one using my Firebase wrapper, and it's just what you think it would be. You can type questions in, you can vote on the questions, and then at the end of the talk, I'll have a bullet point list of all the questions that are the top priority, and all the faded out insults at the bottom. Sign a little Reddit and then we'll just hide them. Okay, so I'll get started, and we'll go over those in detail in a moment. Okay, so talk is called Angular plus Firebase equals unimaginable developer bliss. My name is Mark Nutter, at Mark Nutter on Twitter, and I currently work for Code 42.
Are you hiring Code 42?
Are we hiring? We will be hiring again this summer, and we probably will need good Angular developers. So we do use Angular in a pretty substantial way at Code 42, and just a lot of general purpose JavaScript stuff, but kind of across the board. Code 42 is going to be looking for good talent in. I mean, we're in every stack basically, so there's a lot of room there for growth. But I've been a Rails developer since 2006, but I was freelance for 7 years, so this is my first real job, actually. I went to college at the U, I got a physics degree, and I couldn't find a job. So my brother's Charlie Nutter, he's one of the developers on Zero Ruby. He told me about this really cool thing called Ruby on Rails, and I had done, I computer science minor, so I'd done some programming stuff in college, but I never really built an app, and I didn't really know how to be productive. I knew how to make a web page front page or Dreamweaver, but I didn't know how to actually make an app and talk to a database. And it didn't really solidify in my head what's object-oriented programming and why is it useful. I mean, toy examples are fine, but until you actually have something that maps to the real world, it doesn't really solidify in your mind until I tried out Ruby on Rails, which had a really neat way of mapping object-oriented design and MVC design to a database. So I understood, oh yeah, posts. I understand it's an object and it has properties, and other objects can inherit from that, or other objects can be associated with that, and that's how it gets into the database. And basically, it made web development make sense for me. And it also it handled a lot of the mundane details that in my first attempts at web development, like PHP and other things, were kind of a high barrier of entry for me. For me, it was always like a side project thing. I wanted to learn how to web develop, but I had responsibilities at school. Of course, when I couldn't find a job, I had nothing to do. So I got into Rails development, and it took care of a lot of that. It made me very productive. You didn't have to worry about how am I routing all my requests, or how am I talking to the database, or how do I even communicate or query the data. I don't have to worry about any of that stuff. This is all taken care of. All those details are taken care of for me. It all gets out of the way. I hit Rails scaffold, I got my models, everything's generated for me, and I'm productive. You get that immediate feedback loop, which I know is the reason why a lot of people are big on Angular, because they gave you an immediate feedback loop. That's a big deal in new frameworks and new technologies. So I was hooked. And as I said, I was freelancing as a Rails developer for 7 years until I joined Code 42 in October. It was awesome, never ran out of work, got a little lonely, so I wanted coworkers. It's like the #1 reason I joined the company. Knew a lot of people there just from different freelancing gigs I had done throughout the cities. And I thought, it'd be fun to have friends to go to work with, so just my cat. So I'm liking it. When I was freelancing, I spent about a third of my time on my side projects. And during that time, and I'm sure you guys have all noticed this, that front-end development, from the time when we were building like static, stateful, or stateless web apps and Rails and PHP, has just exploded in complexity over the last 7 years. To the point where some of us could probably just call ourselves pure front-end developers. It's no longer just sprinkle a little jQuery in here and make the thing do the cool thing, put a carousel in, or make it Web 2.0-ish, We're now at the point where there's an equal amount of complexity on the front end, and in some cases, an even greater amount of complexity on the front end than some of these back-end, full-stack web development frameworks. And so, because of that, I've kind of just moved closer and closer to the front end until I was pretty much just writing JavaScript all the time. And I've been doing that for the last 3 years, unless I needed, for a side project to spin Rails up or work with a Node app or some other, passing fancy. But for the most part, it was JavaScript, and that's where I am today. So, a little context behind how I became a developer, how I think I became better at a developer, and then also kind of the main focus of this talk. This app that I have built, basically the first app I ever built, and have rebuilt multiple times, and most recently using Angular and Firebase. So it started out as a competition. This competition was between me and a friend who was a developer also, and he was a PHP developer. He was already in the field working, making good money when I was kind of floundering and trying to find a job after college. And he had made this app. This is pre-Facebook, that we all used to communicate. Kind of like a glorified forum, but it was more just like Facebook's wall or news feed, where big feed, and we could all just post and reply to each other, and a little extra features put in here and there. But for the most part, it was just kind of like this stream that we could constantly tap into and just chronologically communicate with each other. It was at that time I actually had tried jumping into the source code and helping out a little bit, but for anyone here who worked with PHP or has a lot of experience with PHP, the quality of PHP projects varies wildly from one to the next. So it's not shocking to me that I was scared off of web development and development in general from that initial experience, trying to parse that as like a complete novice. But it was interesting because when I got into Rails, I thought, well, what's a good project to work on? I thought, well, maybe I'll make that app, which we use and have been using since 2003 or 4 when we first made it. What if I remade it in Rails? Rails is a super productive framework, and I think I can do this. I think it'd be really cool. And so I started working on it, and then I caught wind of him working on the redesign of that application at the same time. So it was just kind of this competition. he's a big libraries over frameworks kind of guy. He didn't like Rails, big into PHP, but a very talented developer. I thought Rails was the bee's knees, and I thought this was a great first project to work on. So we just kind of both worked on these different applications. The first one that I had, this is the first iteration. I don't have any screenshots of his because they're gone now, and the Wayback Machine didn't like keep any of the images or anything, so it would have been interesting to show. But this is what mine looked like. And I kind of cheated because we also have another friend that's a really kick-ass designer, UI designer. So I contracted him or co-opted him and had him design the site. So this is what he came up with in like 2000. I think this was maybe 2009 or 8. No, this would have been like actually 2006, 7. And then I went about building this application with Rails. And the long story is, made short is that I think probably due to the design, but also due to the fact that I was able to ramp it up really quickly and add features really quickly and have this fast development cycle, all my friends moved over to this app, and then his app kind of just went away. And it's still kind of a sore spot. But he did some really cool stuff too. I mean, he moved to like a single page app style at that time as well. And he was a really talented JavaScript developer. And I only barely knew JavaScript at the time, and it was mostly just Rails, HTML, CSS, and anytime I had to deal with JavaScript, it was kind of this big nightmare. I don't know if anyone's here is a Rails developer and ever worked with RJS templates, but that was a complete disaster. So we've come a long way, and then I just keep rebuilding, and every couple of years or so, new stuff comes out. I learn more, and I rebuild it. And this is a really, I think, valuable thing to do is kind of revisit an idea, a simple concept, and try it again. And throw it all out and work on it again. So you can see here I'm adding more dynamic stuff. The threads are now not just one big chronological mess. They're all kind of nested in these carousels because of 2008 carousels were big, right? So that was kind of a novel idea at the time. Of course, people hate carousels now. But here's the like a live online thing. This is a funny thing to point at because this was incredibly difficult to get to work and was really finicky and everything. Would be made absolutely trivial by Firebase. I mean we're talking a matter of like taking weeks of futzing with this thing to like 10 minutes to get to work. So we've come a long way, obviously. Another iteration of it. This was my first, and I blurred it out just to protect my friend's identity. we don't pull any punches for him in this forum, so it's probably better that I did that. But this was my first. This is a Rails app. They're all Rails app up to this point. This was my first Rails app with a single-page app on top of it and with Angular, because I was like, oh, cool, single-page apps, Angular, awesome. So I'll throw that on top, have Rails in the background, and it was awesome. I mean, that was like the first moment that I'm like, I'm not doing DOM manipulation and managing all this stuff, and it just all works. And I mean, I got this up and running. Every time I rebuild it, it's like takes less and less time to do. We're getting better. And so this one actually is still running, but we kind of moved over to the new one, which is this one. So I got into Firebase and really got interested in real-time tech. Real-time. That's a caveat, by the way. If you ever say real-time to a server guy, they'll give you this stink eye because it's not really real-time, right? But we'll just do air quotes real-time from now on and assume that's what it means. So because I have real-time, I got rid of the like carousel-style threads, and I had every thread just put out in these columns, kind of like a Trello, like a Kanban board, and do like a side-scrolling deal to get to the other threads. The reason being, it's all real-time. So before, it was like all assumed to be asynchronous. I would go in and make a big long post and come, and then I would check all the posts I missed. Now, if we happen to be on the same page at the same time, that post could turn into a real-time discussion. And that's not going to scale well if I have like, 100 comments or 200 comments that I have to navigate left and right with on a carousel. So kind of rethink the whole map of this, the whole design, and say, these are all just basically long chat threads. They could be asynchronous if you want them to be, but at any moment they could turn synchronous and turn into a real-time conversation. And that's actually worked out pretty well. There's been times where I've been on the site with my friends at the same time, and we just start talking, and it's this big, long thread. And then I haven't done this yet, but you could like blast that down, and then if people wanted to skip over it, they can. If they want to see what the conversation was, you can let them. But it was the way I thought of to do the real time and have it still kind of keep the same spirit and the nature of the app. So this was and another big component of this is Angular. This is Firebase. So there's no Rails here. That was another big thing. I moved so far away from Rails that I completely ditched it for this rewrite, which is probably the main point of the whole talk here. Then I moved on to this is more professional life. I moved on to a contract about 3 years ago for a website called Kona.com. It's kind of a Basecamp type competitor. I came in really early on. They had just kind of gotten the like Rails scaffold set up, and they were just going to go about building this kind of normal Rails stateless, refresh every time type app. And of course, I had been spending all my time playing around with the real-time stuff and playing around with Pusher and which is a real-time like as a service. Playing around with Angular, well not Angular at the time, but JavaScript MVC and some other frameworks that were getting big at the time, and of course just JavaScript in general. So I suggested, hey, if we're going to do this, we've got to differentiate ourselves from the big guys, the base camps of the world, and we're a lot of competitors. Asana just throwing their hat in the ring, and there's go on and on. But I was like, we gotta get ahead of the trend and make this thing full real time. Everything's real time. You change a task, everyone gets that change immediately. You make a comment, you see the comment right away. And lo and behold, that's exactly how Basecamp works now. That's exactly how Asana works now. And all the big guys basically went that direction. So thank goodness we all decided to get on board. And it was kind of like a company that was a little startup inside of a big company. So they were lucky to have kind of free reign and not to be, not to go through a big decision tree just to try out new tech. So it was awesome. We got to try a lot of cool stuff. We used Pusher for real-time events. We used Rails on the back end. We used not Angular, because at the time it wasn't really getting a lot of publicity. It's still pretty raw. We used JavaScript MVC. I don't know if anyone here is familiar with that, but it was like one of the early, still around, and it's around another incarnation called CanJS right now, which does two-way binding. But it was finally a way to structure your JavaScript applications. I mean, I had reams and reams of spaghetti jQuery code, and I probably all have that in our history of just like callback hell, evented hell. Where are things happening? And I've got one huge file, and now I got to go through the task of like breaking it up into multiple files. It's a nightmare. So I wanted to bring some structure to the app. So we agreed to do a single-page application on the front end, communicate REST AJAX to the Rails app, and then have Pusher update all our model changes to the clients based on which clients have permissions for those updates, and then just rehydrate everything. Of course, that meant manually going in and having jQuery update the DOM every time, and that was another tedious thing. But at the time, this was all pretty cutting-edge stuff as far as we were concerned, and we were pretty happy with the results. And it got what we needed done, and to this day, if you go to Kona.com, that's the app that's running. It's a JavaScript MVC app. Then we built the mobile apps. This is another interesting story I won't get into, but this was my first real major Angular app. And what's interesting about it is that these are PhoneGap mobile apps. We had tried doing native, didn't work out. The team was overseas, and there was bad communication, and it just wasn't up to par and kind of behind schedule. We briefly tried Sencha. Sencha really wasn't where it needed to be at the time. It was good for kind of a basic data style app, but as soon as the stakeholders asked for Facebook style sliding drawer, all bets were out the window. So we're like, we have to do this another way. We have to lean on native for things that we need performance for, and we have to lean on JavaScript for things where we want to share code because we're a small team. We can't just hire an entire iOS team and an entire Android team, and who knows what is going to become popular in the future. So we decided to go the Angular route, wrapping it inside of a native wrapper, and then leaning on native when we needed to. So this was our basically kind of mimicking the same app we had on the desktop side. but we got to do the whole thing again, which as developers, you know, is awesome. Total greenfield, throw everything out, do it with the new technology, right? This is what I love to do. So we built this Angular app and threw it into PhoneGap, and actually performed pretty well. Like the drawers and everything are so smooth, the animations are smooth because it's all native, and then basically everything from the bar on the top to the bar on the bottom is our Angular app, and all the rest is native. And then of course we're tying in native for push notifications, camera, all the stuff you don't normally have access to through the web API. And we were able to deliver pretty decent mobile apps across multiple platforms, with many versions back on Android, I think all the way back to 2.3, which is pretty impressive to have it actually function. Using HTML5 on 2.3 is unusable. It's not even worth trying. If you do a native approach, it's actually not too bad. But anyways, I digress. So this is what it looked like in the beginning. We've got JavaScript MVC. That's talking to the DOM, but there's this jQuery thing in there, right? I got to do all that stuff myself. It sucks. AJAX communication with the server. That's, you know, again, I got to do that all myself. I got to push to the server. I got to ask the server, is there anything new? You know. Active record callbacks. That's kind of there for the next slide. But Rails app, and then we had a SQL database. This is the bridge to getting the real-time stuff. So every time an active record, for those who are familiar, it's basically, you know, before save, after save, yada 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 for Rails. Before it goes into the database, you can do some stuff. What we were doing is we were sending that information off to all the clients connected via WebSockets using Pusher, because we didn't want to do all that plumbing ourselves. Pusher's awesome, but you know, which they did. But at least we can get stuff pushed to our application without having to ask for it all the time. And with a highly real-time app, you don't want to be doing long form to take your server down. So that was pretty awesome, but not awesome enough. This made it awesome. Angular, right? So the DOM connection there, this is what I'm using to represent two-way binding. Just works, right? I don't have to do all that stuff. I don't need jQuery at all if I don't want it. And it just, that whole complexity, all that boilerplate, all that tedium is out the window. I can focus on my business logic. It's pretty awesome, but you know, I'm still stuck with dealing with my business logic down here, or not my business logic, my tedium, you know, my wiring up, my bolting on of X number of abstractions, and then, you know, finally getting it into the database and following the whole workflow. So this is what I'm talking about today. Get rid of that stuff. Get rid of the abstraction. Talk right to the database, right? Because when you have MVC, I mean, a little ridiculous. I heard you like MVC in your MVC, right? What you see in some of these like acronym soups, right? Or symbolism soups. MVB, MC, MV, BB, whatever. It's like a tragic Roman or Greek novel. It's ridiculous because we're duplicating. We're not keeping it simple. We're not drawing up our application. Why can't we just talk to the database? This is a question that Meteor.js asked. Let them talk to Mongo, you know? They figured out the security layer. We'll let the server do that. That's fine. We'll concede that point. But why can't I just talk to the database, you know? That's what Firebase lets you do. Here's the music. Angular.js. That brought us two-way binding to the DOM. Firebase. That brought us two-way binding to the server. What happens when you combine them? Three-way binding. No more do you need to talk to the database, manage all that complexity, update the DOM. You can go right from the database to the DOM, right from the DOM to the database, and you just focus on the thing that matters, and that's your application. A little dramatic, but... brings us back to this application. We have.
What is that video clip actually?
I will tell you that because it's amazing if you guys haven't seen this movie. It was a series of movies, 3 of them that were made from the 90s into the 2000s. That one was Koyaanisqatsi. Philip Glass is that does the musical score. There's another one called Nakoikatsi, and then another one called, these are Native American words. Anyways, it has these scenes where they like sets up these establishing shots and does like time-lapse videos or very interesting scenes, trying to make a point about humanity destroying the planet or like things spiraling out of control or just a commentary. And when I was making these slides, I thought, man, this reminds me of I could hear Philip Glass music playing in my head and like the stoplights and the high-speed motion and everything. So I thought I'd throw that in there. But it is awesome. You should check those movies out if you haven't seen them. But yeah, so we're taking over the world here. This is me just talking right to the database with that application. So I went to work building this, and it was awesome. Firebase is an amazing company that they deserve every bit of funding they've gotten so far. And so I tweeted about it, like any developer. Firebase plus Angular. This is actually the title of this talk. And they liked that. So they made a blog post about it, and or they at least referenced me. I don't want to say that. Make the Angular wrapper, but at any rate, it was validation for them. It felt good for a small startup. And shortly after that, they announced their Angular Firebase wrapper because they obviously they saw the same benefit. There's this three-way binding, what they call it, which is kind of a buzzword. But anyway, so they came up with their Angular wrapper. This was long after I had already dove into this application and then also started writing my own. So we kind of both released ours at the same time, but they kind of serve 2 different purposes, so they don't really compete. And I'll get into why they're very different now. But I will first explain what Firebase is. How many people here are familiar with Firebase? How many people have developed with Firebase? And how many have never heard of it before? A couple people. Okay, cool. Well, then you're good. Let's start this. I want to check my. How's my app doing? How am I doing? I mean, do I got a lot of green or do I got a lot of red?
Still a lot of lights going on.
I'd say about 75% green.
Oh, okay. All right. Awesome. Kick ass. So, the backend is a service. It's kind of a fancy buzzword for saying we'll handle all the stuff that happens on the server. Fire your DevOps guys. All communication is. Don't retract that statement. All communication is real time with their quotes via WebSockets. They use the fallback slash. I don't know if they do long form, but anyways, WebSockets, as you probably know, are in every browser. Developer console, you can log in. I don't know if you've used parse before, but you need a way to actually interact with the data and manage other things like tokens and authentication and stuff. So they have a nice backend for that. They have libraries for JavaScript, iOS, Android, Node, REST API you can hit, more and more coming, and a lot of third-party open source stuff that communicates with it as well, I think. Although the main app is closed source, software as a service. The service part means we want to make money, right? So that's both good and bad. It's a kick-ass service, you got to pay for it. And they built it with Scala, Netty, and Node.js and MongoDB. And, I'm not sure in what percentages, but I do know that they're relying on the JVM. JVM is awesome, but they are using MongoDB, so it's kind of like this, new world meets old. But obviously, it's working really well for them because I've never really had any problems with performance and very little downtime. So these guys are seriously talented. Or it's an endorsement of the JVM.
When you speak about performance, how many concurrent users are you talking about?
For me, not much. I'm still on the free account.
Like, what does that mean? Like less than 10?
I'm talking more uptime. Like, am I even able to write and read? So there were times where I just couldn't. I couldn't use the system at all. This was early days, but I haven't had that happen in almost a year.
Okay.
So they've stabilized, but I haven't pushed it I'm sure there are apps out there that have pushed it and they've run into maybe their issues, but nothing that I've heard nothing but good things. So.
About 10,000 at once.
10,000 at once?
Yeah.
That's the big boy.
What kind of communications were going on at that point? Was it just 10,000 people polling in 15 minutes, or is it 10,000 getting updates every 500 milliseconds to make sure that it's real time?
It's pretty close. So it's a gaming app, so we do pretty intensive polling. But we're on like 8 to 10 charge right now, so
Okay.
it's not just on
Right. Awesome. That's
So
great.
are you, sorry, I'll talk to you later.
Okay, I'll finish quick if I can hear you. So what else is like Firebase? It's not open source. That always makes people look for other solutions. Medium. Everyone knows Medium. These guys were like Rails 2.0 in my mind. They splashed onto the scene, and they were asking the same question: why the heck am I doing this like middleman stuff? Let me talk to the database. And they're well funded, and that's gonna hopefully they do well. But it's a validation of this idea. Hoodie is another one. I don't know if you guys have heard of this before. Same basic idea. They have a twist on it. They're using, I believe, CouchDB, and then they're actually using PouchDB on the front end, which is kind of like a small JavaScript implementation of Couch. And Couch's big thing is like syncing. So they just do real-time syncing between the stuff you have local, of course you get offline access for free, and then they just make sure that those two things are. I'm super intrigued by this, but I haven't tried it out myself. But it's an interesting approach, anyways. That's open source. These guys are closed source. This is like one of the main competitors. I only just heard about them recently, but they're really like embracing the Angular community. They have this thing called Go Angular.
Yep.
And that's they took a more like my approach, more like an active record style model approach of integrating with Angular. But I haven't played around with it yet. I mean to. Another one I found, Deployed. This is total open source. This is like you run basically your own little Firebase, and then you have a REST API, and you have the real-time stuff, and you have a backend, and it's awesome. I also have not played around with this. And then there's Sales, which is kind of like some inspiration from Rails. It's a Node app, I think, with Express, and this does all the same real-time stuff and REST, so it's very similar to Deployed. All right, so I'll go quickly over the basics of Firebase, just because it provides some context for people who haven't played around with it much. And these are just directly pulled from their site, so you can just check the same stuff out on their like getting started guides and everything. But I thought I'd go through it. This is it's kind of like a key store database and key value store, and then they map the URLs that you have at whatever Firebase app you created to the different the nested keys. And, you go to /users, and then you're interacting with that reference, and then when you push items to that, it's going to push you to the user's endpoint and keep adding items in that node, basically. And then that's basically how they're all mapped to actual URLs, and that's how you reference things in the JavaScript app, and that's how you actually play around with their backend and everything. So it was pretty straightforward. Just kind of like a basic key value store.
But you can get root as well. But you can get just the slash and get the whole graph.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah. You can download the whole thing and save it off. You can delete the whole thing, which I've done a couple times. Yeah, and you can go into the thing and you can edit live, and then of course those changes will propagate to all your apps too. So it's kind of like just having an awesome little back-end admin console ready to go. Yeah.
Are you going to talk about the security at all? Can Fred write it, Jack stuff? Can Jack write Fred stuff?
Yeah, I don't think I have anything specific in there, but I was going to mention it. It's important. Basically, it's a file that you just set up these kind of JavaScript strings, mostly just parators or conditions, kind of a big JSON file for all the different things you want read or write access on, and then it'll check, can you read? And it'll look in there, it'll say, if the user ID exists inside this table and is part of this group, then let them read. you know, or if they're an admin, let them write. So you just basically create this file and then upload it to their server or edit it live on their backend console, and then that handles all your permissions for you.
And you've either got like something, it knows who you are through some sort of session, or you've got some token.
Yep, they handle all the authentication and everything. You have a token you can generate, and then they allow you to authenticate in a number of different ways. Facebook, simple authentication. Twitter, they just ended support for Persona. Moment of silence for Persona. But yeah, it's apparently not working out. So that all makes sense, right? Here's a basic example. Hopefully it's big enough. This is how you listen to changes. So again, this is our reference point. I'm looking at users, and I'm looking at Julie users. And I want any time that changes, I want to be alerted. I want to know. So then, so this will just fire. This will fire off every time, and you can see we're doing we're just doing alerts and stuff. But this is where you would update the DOM if you had to do it manually. Of course, we don't have to if we're using Angular. Let's see. So down here, this is the actual pushing of that data, or the setting of the data. The same endpoint, actually I'm going one nested further, it's one way of doing it. I want to set her name, so I get the reference to that key, or that value, the key, and then I just do a set on it. There's a couple different ways you can do it, but this is an example. That will fire off the request here, or the callback here, and then everyone else who's connected and who has permission to see this will get that event, and then there you go. It's as simple as that. Same deal down here. We have location that's a list. They have a concept of lists, and I'm listening to. They have events like child added, child modified, child removed, all things having to do with lists. And then down here you can see I'm getting a reference to a push. The push basically gives me a reference to the new list item, but it's not really fully qualified yet until I add data to that thing. So it'll give me a reference ID. I'm pretty sure I have to actually set data to it for it to like take action. So that's what I do here. I set a new user. Boom, this one fires, and now I get that user, and then I would update my list, right? All pretty simple so far. All right, so we have a bunch of different examples of how to like find different or set different values on these references, and also talking about priority. So they to like put things in a certain order, because we're not really dealing with SQL here. They have this concept of just like putting in these kind of arbitrary values for priority, and then you can set, or then you can get things back at certain priorities, or you can get things back.
Did it turn off?
TV turned on.
Does it create a proxy on the client side, Mark? Is it like how you get those updates on the client browser?
It doesn't even have the standby light. Oh, there we go.
Through WebSockets?
Yeah, so
Kill the screen.
so basically it's just setting. I mean, their source code is obfuscated, of course, but so I would do it. It's basically just setting up these WebSocket listeners at whatever endpoints, whatever server you happen to be interacting with, and then it's just listening to it and just pushing it off to you with the callback.
This is WebSockets, right? No, like forever frame and.
I'm pretty ssure they have fallbacks. And I'm not sure if they use Flash as a fallback, but that's a well-known fallback because Flash has its own layer that it can use because it's obviously it's communicate with the OS. So that's what you can use, but then you got to use Flash. And then another fallback would be just long polling, but I don't even know if they would bother doing that. I'm not sure if they do. But you can see here I'm actually like picking a certain priority. I'm saying I can give it a limit. I can use priorities to get things in a certain order or to do pagination. But it's not the most straightforward thing in the world. And when you get a really complicated app, you start building and you start wanting to do infinite scrolling or pagination or all the standard stuff you would do in an application. It's kind of hard to manage all that stuff. So that's a big reason why I wrote my little library. So let's see how I'm doing here. Oh, who's this guy? All right, I think I'm still doing all right. So we'll talk about this demo because this is written using Firebase and Angular in the basic way. I'm not actually using Angular Fire in any of my demos because I kind of ran out of time. But at the very least, this one is just pure Angular pure Firebase with Angular, and I'll pop the source up here. That's the wrong one. Okay. All right. So this one is okay. So this is the source code. Real simple. Just one main controller. I'm just injecting in my Firebase endpoint so that I can swap it out with anything later if I'm like a dev environment or whatever. But I just want that out of my controller. And then from there, it's actually newing it up in there, so I get an instance of Firebase at the reference I want, which is I think how I do in Firebase, whatever. And then in here, you can see I'm getting a reference to my attendees. That's why I'm calling you guys. And then when you first pop in here, I'm pushing you onto the list, so I'm creating a new reference for you. And then I'm setting up a listener because I want to know what other people I added to this list. That's how they pop in. That's how the squares show up when other people pop their page open. And then, of course, I also want to know when they change when you hit the up arrow or the down arrow. And that's just changing a basic value every time you hit up or down. It just subtracts 1 point from your status or adds it, and then I just map that to the opacity of 2 differently red and green boxes. Pretty simple stuff. And I store a couple storage, so please don't figure your local storage. Okay, so yeah, so this is these events are firing off, and then I'm kind of having to do like my little safe apply here for Angular because it's not in Angular's world. So anytime you can do anything that isn't aware of that digest loop, you kind of have to make Angular aware of it. But sometimes it is aware of it, and that's why you have to check if you're actually digesting right now or not. Anyways, this is all going to be fixed with zones or whatever, I think, when they come up with that. But for now, we do these little hacks. But I didn't like having Firebase in my controller. I don't want to know about it. For all I know, Firebase was going to go under, and I'd have to move on to Go Angular, or I'd have to move on to Parse or whatever. So
testability too, right?
And for especially for testability, because try creating a mock for Firebase that does all the same stuff behind the scenes that they do. I punted on that actually, and for my end-to-end tests, I stood up a separate Firebase instance that was for development environment, and then I ran all my tests real time against that, and that actually worked really well. It's a pretty good integration test actually. That was for that code lab. But so yeah, I think this is pretty straightforward. But you can start to see that, and I didn't organize it very well, but you can start to see I'm getting like, I don't want to see this. I don't want to worry about setting my bindings up and responding to this stuff. I just want to like set the, I just want my attendees, and then I want it all to just work. So that's what Angular does really well for you. If you just give it the right reference, it'll take the rest. And we'll just quickly look at the view, just so you can see. This is all nothing surprising here. Pulling in Angular and Firebase and all that stuff, and then I just have this list of attendees that I'm updating in a kind of a dumb way in the main controller. I could be doing it smarter, but I'm basically just saying, give me the attendees, just refresh that whole thing. It'll pull down all the information. Probably a more efficient way to do it, but for the purpose of this demo, it's fine. So then there's the other application. Let's see. Oh wow, look at this. What the heck is this? It's big in the cyan, I guess.
Somebody is.
Or one person is, right? Yeah, you'll notice I didn't put any restrictions. So, if you really, really want a question answered, just rail out for a while. Someone's fighting.
That would be me.
So the reason it's doing that is because when they swap places, your next click is going to be the output for the other one. So you get this like locked in this eternal struggle between the two top questions.
This is the great equalizer.
But this is, I mean, we're pushing this pretty hard here, right? It's responding pretty well. I don't know what your guys' connection is, but it's actually, it's obvious. Okay. All right. So anyways, okay, so there are, this is a totally failed experiment. There's like one good question. But, you know, the spirit works. So, all right, so let's look at this. It's a little more complicated. We have questions, and now we have an association. We have votes on a question. So when you get into dealing with associations in like a nested key value store thing, if you don't normalize things, you're putting all your vote objects under those objects in that tree, which is kind of a nightmare, because what happens if you want to change the reference at some point, or what happens if you want to make your references more efficient and not have to duplicate data everywhere? Well, you normalize your database and you just create references to these things. So I have a votes table, and we can show that in a second, and I have a table and key, basically. At the same level, I have my questions. So let's take a look at the code. Actually, let's take a look at the database. So this is not how I do. This is live AMA. So you can see in here. Wow. Oh my goodness. So you can see this is real time too. That's kind of cool, right? They built this using Firebase. I'm sure. I hope. And you can see that it's going yellow because things are happening, you know, and it'll actually show you values popping in and out, and you know, things going nuts. And you can see I have questions and I have votes. They're both at the same level. And then inside here, I have a rels for my relationships. And then here's all my vote IDs. And then that's how I get back. Because I would just subscribe to that endpoint whenever a rel pops in. Then I go ask Firebase for the actual value of that in the other main root level key, which is in here, votes. So that kind of complexity I didn't want to have to do, of course, and I certainly didn't want to have to do that with controllers. So I thought, well, I'll just, you know, abstract all that stuff out, put it into the library, like, you know, like you would anything, like an active record type thing, and it's very heavily inspired by active record, and then I'll just let that take care of that complexity. So I'm using that for this example. So in here, the next app, again, I'm injecting in my Firebase instance, which, you know, is just my endpoint newing it up. Then in here, I have a couple other modules. I have a factory for questions, so it's my model. I can instantiate new questions. I can add things to the prototype. So it makes it very nice to deal with. And then I can create some getters, which I could use later for like tallying votes. And then I have a vote. You can see in here I'm setting my associations. And then this will make sure that all those details all the normalization details are taken care of for me by my library, because it knows that it's going to have nested votes inside of it, so it knows where to put these references. Votes, they know that they belong to something, so that they can handle what they need to as far as parents go. And then I can also add other options and stuff, and I have a full range of callbacks that you can see. Now my callbacks are in my Angular code. They're not in my Rails code, which is pretty awesome. I can have my after save and my after update and everything and hook into that stuff after. Here I'm overriding the init, so I'm having it actually go and query the votes. Now look at my controller. Awesome, right? Super tiny. Controllers are supposed to be tiny. All I'm doing in here is calling query, because I like to be able to actually tell it to go set up all those listeners. And so here I'm telling, and there's another big reason for this actually is I may not want to listen to 10,000 children, because it will just pump all those back to you. You just say, give me everything at this point, you know. So when I query, I think that's what I'm doing now, but you can actually pass in a limit or, you know, a range or whatever and an order, and then it will handle all those details for you, so you don't have to, like, you know, do this chain all these methods like crazy inside your controller, which I thought was kind of ugly. But then you have scope questions, and here I'm just getting a reference to the items that come in. So I'm kind of managing it in my own little in-memory local, you know, store object and list, and then And then I know that scope questions is bound to all those items. I can filter them down, but this is like, wholesale all questions I'm dealing with here. And then I also can do up, instantiate new questions, which gives me access to their prototype methods, and I can do things like save, and then that will just manage it, and that way I can actually like change the state of that object, which now their Firebase wrapper I think lets you have this intermediary point. You may not want to push it to Firebase right away. You want to like make sure it's valid, for instance. This lets you do that. It just kind of saves it locally, and then when you're writing, you hit save. For the record, this three-way binding thing, I found out that they coined the term like as well. When I was creating the talk, I thought, oh, that's so clever. And then I go into their website and like right in the docs, it's like, yeah, three-way binding. Actually, I think I call it four-way binding, and I'm not sure I've wrapped my head around whether it's three-way binding or four-way. But anyway, so I got an ask method, which will save it, and then I do up a new question, and that's pretty svelte, pretty nice. And then in my index, all I'm doing is just binding or acting on with my ng repeats and whatnot to that list of questions. And I never did get this to work right. But and then where's my ng repeat? Somewhere in here. ng repeat questions ordered by vote total. Of course, the vote total, that was my little prototype method I threw on my question model, and that just goes through and it'll calculate all the votes that it has. So it has access to its own votes, not all. All that complexity is managed. You just have you can just use it in a very like active record way. It's a nice little ORM for Firebase. Not that Firebase isn't easy to use, but once you start making really complicated applications, this stuff becomes really important. And I was like, I'm going to use this as a replacement for Rails. So I'm going to run into some complications, I'm sure, and these are some of the limitations that I hit. But I think it can be done because this app has been running really well for a long time. So yeah, does this all make sense? That's an example, the AMA one, and I can create new votes by actually calling new, and that's kind of a nice thing actually, because when I go into the code here, you can see I have voting, actually question. I'm calling question.vote, yeah, and then inside the question I have that defined here. So I get access to an object that has a new, that has all these methods that you would want to run on a collection like an association. It's very familiar for people who've done Rails development. And then I can call that within the context of the parent. So if I say, if I get a question, and then I say question.votes, call the question.votes method, and then .new, it will create a new vote, but it'll do it within the context of that question and add the parent ID and put it in the right place. If I just say new vote, then it will just create it with no reference whatsoever. So I can actually use my vote model not as an association, and just as a standalone model too in the database, which is kind of nice. All right, so I'll try. I have something after this. All right, so this is my thing, Firebase resource. I haven't worked on it in a long time, but I was surprised to find that it actually works really well. So they must be keeping their API pretty stable. Only had to fix one issue. It encapsulates Firebase. I didn't want to have stuff put in the controls. One of the main complaints I had, and I think they kind of responded to that too, because we had a little thread going in the Google group, and I just gave them my feedback and said what I had created and showed it to them. Because one, because I didn't want that including my controllers, but the other one, I haven't really mentioned, but I wanted to be able to swap their code out, or their dependency on Firebase out as well, because I want to always use Firebase. Or whatever. So that was important to me, to have kind of like a really simple but understandable interface with my model, and then as long as I'm adhering to that, I can just swap whatever I want in, and then it'll all work the same way. So that was kind of my goal. I wanted to make a parse one. I want to make one that worked with Rails and all that, and but like I said, it handles normalization. It will, oh yeah, timestamps things. There's another thing as a Rails developer I like is that the auto, save and update timestamps. That's something that Firebase didn't have. I'm not sure if they have it yet, but I thought that they said they were working on it. But at any rate, this does it for you. Pagination is a big thing to solve because it's not the most intuitive thing in the world using these priorities and stuff. And I'm glad I only had to solve it once because now I can just lean on this thing, and if it works like it's supposed to, then I actually can just say page and then pass it the page, and based on what order it'll subscribe to the next block. So that's a really interesting thing. I guess the point I forgot to make about working with a real-time interface or real-time communication with the server is that you're not actually just like, I want stuff, and then I'm going to get more stuff, and it's on my terms. When I ask for another page, I'm just saying I want to subscribe to changes on X number more items, and then X more, and then on and on and on. And now I've just like the floodgates keep growing and growing as I do that. So it's those kind of things you just never really think about when you're doing normal, async communication. But when you're doing this, those points, you run into those pain points pretty quickly, and you have to figure out like how much can I actually subscribe to, manage my subscription basically. Yeah.
So when you're doing that, you've got filtering, sorting applied based on your queries to Firebase or Firebase. Will it resort or aggregate on every request that you make and send you an updated list, or just a diff, or how does that work?
On Firebase's end?
So you said when you request Firebase,
Right.
it's what you got last and what you need next, right?
You can specify that, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we apply that methodology, and then we've also applied filtering and sorting on top of that data set,
Right.
will it re-query and understand what you've got, what you need, and pass it? It kind of gets really gray really quick.
I think so, because one of the features I put in there is that I have my own little store in memory, because I was like, I don't want to have to keep going to Firebase for all this stuff, I'm on the free, So, but they were like, oh yeah, a lot of that stuff's already handled. Like, we'll only go out and get it if we need to. So you're kind of like doing double work there. I have other reasons. I want to be able to store this stuff in local storage, but either way, that's a very good point. And I'm pretty sure they handle that complexity, but I can't say 100% sure whether they do. I would imagine. But at any rate, I did kind of put that in there, and just even having, because you may want to have all those connections. If I paginate, if I scroll infinitely for a long time, I may want to get updates on all that stuff, right? So this is what I'm saying is stored in memory, so not keep requesting Firebase. That may not be necessary. And then assigning local attributes. Oh yeah, when I do up an object, anything I add to it will just stay in memory until I hit save and then it gets pushed up. And then you can add things as a leading underscore. So if I want to add, what's the example I had? I wanted to add data to something that really was just for like presenting it. I want to decorate it somehow. I want to put some kind of calculation I made on it so that I can say whether it's marked red, but I don't want to persist that to the server. I know that if I do leading underscore on that attribute, it won't push it to the server. And that is something that they did add to their Angular Fire thing. So maybe from my suggestion, or maybe just arriving at the same conclusion, but that was another important thing. You don't always want all this stuff to go to the server. So I'll just quickly go over the goals that I had, and maybe still have if I want to keep working on this. But I want to get to be 1.0. Right now it's just a mess, but it works. And it's got tests. It's all tested too. You can pull it down. I'll put links up somewhere.
I just tweeted out a link.
Cool. I wanted to do this local storage and index, DB or whatever kind of persistence, because on that Kona app we did all local storage, so we could have offline access and everything. And we never actually turned it on because it was a whole syncing story. But at any rate, it was neat to have all that stored off. And if it's there and you can use it, why not use it? That's just less stuff I have to go out and get. And then I want to have more querying. I want to handle search. Search, they don't have search. Like, that's something that they're, I think, maybe going to come up with, but that's kind of a hard problem to solve for a key value. It's not like a SQL database with a well thought out searching story. It's just you basically have to kind of create your own index, and they have strategies for that. They have a blog post for that. But again, I don't want to have to do that every time. I want that in my library so that it just kind of manages this index somewhere, and then it makes it easy for me to actually do a search in a performant way and not have to go through every single child. So that's another stretch goal I have for this. And then again, I'd like to create similar ones for all the other services, and then have you be able to swap them out, especially since we don't really know who's going to win this race or who's going to be around. And then for my little Okoto app, I want to make mobile apps. I actually have an iOS app using their Firebase stuff, SDK, which works really well, but I'm solving all the same problems. I would love to just do it in JavaScript, but there were performance issues. Maybe Famous. I'm very interested in Famous, which I think might solve that problem for me. But I emailed like 4 people trying to get access to Famous so that I could get this demo working with that. It'd be like a little surprise, but I didn't hear anything back. So by the time they get back to me, iOS is going to have WebGL anyway, so it won't matter. But either way, I'm intrigued by it, but I want to try it out. So from what I heard, the Angular integration is like amazing. I would like to make it public so that anyone can use this Okoto thing. I want thread forking, so when the conversation goes off the rails, you can create a thread out of it, and a bunch of stuff. Drag and drop, private, make a thread private. And then, of course, I want to throw it all away and use the next big thing, whatever that might be. I'm not sure. Holograms or something. And then the last side is questions. So I'm gonna pop a photo off here, but I want to apply a little CSS to it so that it's obscured. Otherwise, my friends hate me forever. So anyone have a question while I'm doing this, or should I just look at my questions? My background is in League of Legends. That is not a question. Have you had to go to Firebase paid? Any surprises in research usage stats? I have not yet. We did. When we were doing this Kona stuff, we were doing a pusher ad, and this was a fairly. We had like 10,000 some users or whatever, and that got pretty beefy, and the price was pretty hefty. From what I know, I didn't know the exact price, but. I would assume that it's on par because they're doing basically the same thing. I'm pretty sure the pusher guys are actually just doing like I think they have like a Rails with a event machine kind of thing going on. Anyways, it may be cheaper on the Firebase end because they're not relying on Ruby as much, but who knows? No, he hasn't paid yet. That was so you're answering the questions. That's so awesome. How do you pronounce your name? 200. How are you getting 200? So you're going up by increments of 200. So someone is obviously
sitting there holding it. Once you get to the top, you're a winner. Actually, because you don't.
My name is pronounced Nutter, Mark Nutter. Oh, God.
Yeah, it's hacked.
It's totally Thank you. Like
Someone is
30 minutes.
arbitrary.
I should have known. Have you no one paid? Which one is a good question? That's a good question. Angular Waystation is something else we'll have. Okay, Angular Waystation is something else we'll have legs for stuff. That's actually a legitimate question. Thanks. I don't. It seems like Angular has a lot of momentum behind it. But what is your favorite color? Blue. No, red. And what's the best thing to do? Favorite smell? I
have one that I don't mind asking out loud, I guess, even though I'm totally ignorant, so forgive me. But I was trying to wrap my head around so I'm just starting with something super basic, which is like a customer database for billing. And so I am, entering the information, or I've entered already the information into the customer database, and along comes my colleague who knows better than I what that crappy handwriting says, and he's, changing it elsewhere. So then as I gather, that's the third sort of, I forgot what the raise those again, but binding, yeah.
Right.
Well, it'll be
Like
similar,
conflict resolution.
similar to like what we were watching here.
Right.
Whoever acts last is.
It's funny, who here's built a real-time, I know you have, who's built real-time apps, like real-time, you know?
With their example on Firebase.
Sort of.
Or at least even play around with it.
Yeah.
Those questions, you start running into that stuff pretty quick. And just like here, I thought, oh, this is a great idea. Obviously, I didn't, whipped it up. Surprisingly fast, actually, which is a testament to Firebase and Angular. But, I didn't think about these things, like people just railing on it or having like the 2-1 switch, and I meant to vote it multiple times, but yeah.
Well, multiple browsers, incognito, and 3 different browsers.
Right, yeah.
Taking color patterns onto the.
Yeah, and especially conflict resolution. So you can manage that. I mean, basically, you can just not allow them. You can set things in editing state, and then you can have the permissions file actually until it's set in a different. And you can even set the ID of the person who's editing it, for example, or which is done in the config, like.
Yeah, which makes me think of all these body shops that I've worked with who say, "Are you still in that file? Close that file so I can do it." And you're like,
right, yeah. Well, it's not an easy problem to solve.
Right.
The syncing the conflict resolution and stuff. And Google Docs does it really well, but man, I'm sure they threw a lot of engineering. And they do it pretty awesome. But that's the next big thing, I think, is if people can really solve that. Okay, so.
Speaking of conflict resolution, how does it handle transactional data? Is it an all or none, or?
Yeah, right. So their library extracts, mine and their library wrappers handle those details for you. Otherwise, so what they actually call three-way binding, if I'm using kind of incorrectly, is when you change the value, it's changed in the database. Boom. No validation. I'm typing. It's saved.
There's no server-side validation on the data side.
No. Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Outside of the permissions, but I wouldn't call that validation. I'm not even sure you're really supposed to be putting validation in there. Validation is a very interesting topic. My buddy's a programmer, obviously the one that's PHP, and he's still bitter, right? No, but he's he will mess with this stuff. He'll try to break my ass, because why not, right? How do you validate something on a client?
View model, maybe? I mean, in that particular instance.
A what?
View model, and then only do the set if it validates.
That's only client side, though.
Yeah. Client side.
Oh, yeah. If someone really malicious.
It was like this cat and mouse game. Every time I would add like a new regex or something on the front end, he would just like go in and hack it out or whatever. You can't. It's not secure. You have to do it on the server side. And no, I mean you can get close. Like you can say, all right, well, even if he does send stuff, none of the other clients, they're all going to get rules on the other client side. So if they see the tags they shouldn't be seeing, it'll strip them out. Kind of works, but again, I wouldn't, bet my career on it being secure.
So if it's Mongo on the back end, which is just document storage,
right?
If you had a malicious user, could they blow up some property with a bunch of information and just?
I don't know what their injection and attack vectors are and what their protections are for that. I haven't heard of anything. For us, we're pretty isolated as Firebase users because this is an abstraction above Mongo as far as I know.
Okay.
Because Mongo is like a document store, and this, but that's a good point. I mean, how are they? That's a problem and I'm thankful they're solving.
So does Firebase let you build a schema that it adheres to when it wants to write to, or no? No,
this is like Meteor. I mean, this is as scary as Mongo.create whatever that Meteor has, which is why that permissions file is so important. But it actually does.
Collections and objects, right?
Basically just key value, and there's a concept of a list that you can put on the value. But that's about as complicated as it gets beyond Firebase and stuff. But yeah, that's a good point. But that you bring up the main point I want to make about this is that remember at the very beginning I talked about Rails and like that being a light bulb moment for me, and I became a developer and I loved it. And my whole thing has been I'm not a big geek on tools and languages and stuff. I just want to build stuff. I want to make cool stuff. And I will learn what I have to, and I will deal with whatever pain I have to. But if I don't have to deal with that pain, I don't fine. You call me a front end guy, and I don't touch the server side, and then my hacker cred goes down. Big deal. I'm not doing all that stuff. That's it. I'll let the actual guys who have the hacker cred for the server side development handle that. The Firebase guys. Let them deal with injection attacks. I don't want to deal with that. I want to make stupid presentation apps, So that's what Firebase and Angular let me do. Now I don't have to worry about Rails and more, SQL and Ruby and the Rails API and yada yada, all that stuff, and Pusher and everything I want to do to make it approximate this solution. I just worry about my business logic and the fun stuff, the front end. This is, I think, where things are going, unless you're doing some hardcore stuff on the back end. So I'll just end on this, unless there's more questions. So I'll give the quick demo. I did a little, I obscured the app. But this is how it works, basically. I have the threads. I can say, I want this says new threads. So this is my pagination. It'll go and it's creating subscriptions to all those. So now, all those items that pop down in this list, if they're changed at all, they'll stay up to date, which is pretty nice, because it all remains real time. Not that it would really matter if someone's going to edit those, but the point is it all still remains real time. I have these only popping in as I scroll because that was something else I learned the hard way. You don't want to create, look at all these lists. I'm creating a subscription through that WebSocket channel for every single one of these, and now that just increases my my chatter that's happening. So I only want to do that when it's necessary, and I think I might even have it killing the other ones when I keep going. This is an awesome joke, by the way, if you guys want to read that while I talk. Anyways, yeah, so this is the basic app. Hopefully there's no. No. Like I said, I can't be held responsible for this. That's why I blurred out the majority of this. But anyways, and then I kind of did some fun stuff with scrolling because not everyone has a nice trackpad for side scrolling and everything. So my Windows equivalents or friends, they can put their cursor up here and then scroll up and down. It works the same way, or you can just click on it. I tried to please them. And of course, this works awesome. That was another one of my motivations. It works awesome for a tablet, a touchscreen. That was kind of the main target I had, which is why I want to get either the iOS or an HTML5 version of this going. So yeah, that's the basic idea. That's why I wanted Firebase and Angular, and it made this possible, and the motivation behind this whole thing. So I'm way over time. Any other questions, really quickly, unless we can just do it. Good. Cool. Well, but yeah, that's it. 300,000. Thanks.
Okay, does anybody not write their name down that wanted to? Let's pass these back.
No, it's all in memory.
It's all in memory.
I'm just trying to. It does. It refreshes the knowledge.
Because like you can see the line and got a chance to do that. Like I said,
someone else.
There's a ton of different ways.
Everybody else?
function to Firebase. And then you can have that.
It has to have energy models. Yeah, no, there's like I should have stopped this better. This is like so there's no like the parents are so patient. So like normally you have like
Recap, up for grabs is a month subscription to Pluralsight, a year subscription to frontendmasters.com, and a license for a JetBrains product. So WebStorm probably, maybe IntelliJ, maybe RubyMine or whatever else they do. Okay, first come, first serve for pick, and the first winner is Ben Bruman. Roman? What do you want? Sorry? Frontendmasters.com. Alright. Yeah. Frontendmasters. Alright, next winner is this one. This one is Jerome Trump. What do you want? The remaining choices are a JetBrains license or a month subscription to Pluralsight. Pluralsight's like an online training videos website, and JetBrains makes IDEs, so like programs to work with code. If you don't have a JetBrains license, I would recommend getting one. Alright, and last but not least, Mark! You get a month subscription to Pluralsight. Congratulations. That's our show, guys. Come back next month. If somebody doesn't want to present, we'll just tack on some code for a while.
I'll present. Sweet.
Yeah, looks like you're trying to email me. This is our right after here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the replacement for this.
Yeah, I'm gonna break everything.
Yeah.
Probably things to yourselves.
Yeah, no, it works well. I need my own outfit on multiple projects.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I should go over all like some ones, but yeah, Knockout, Machine, I guess NATO, or Python one. There's so many, like you can wire it all together and push your. But what I like about the Firebase is that we just like parse and combine, so I don't worry about it. So, but they're definitely awesome. Yeah, appreciate that. You were the hacker, weren't you? Come on.
I was trying to do the colors. We're starting to mess around. We're doing my rights. What does that mean? Awesome. Facing up, so we don't have to switch something, just a lot of so we're doing long polling. You just email that?
Sorry?
You just email that?
Yeah, you can just long points like that.
Yeah, no, I CC Mark on that, and he'll look
but it just depends on what you're using it for. You're just like updating it every once in a while. You have a chat app like that on application, it's all working on chat.
Yeah. I think we're using it right now for our CRM. We wrote our own CRM that has workflow notifications based off of it. So I do work, and that requires that you need work to do it. So how we notify that, show up to those things like that, and it's just not scalable. That's the biggest problem. It's just scalability.
I don't know about Mark. There's no such thing as this. Yeah, there's no filtering.
Can you pass in? You could pass
No filters.
Yeah, the filtering you can get is I only want the limits and, or I want range between priorities.
You have one priority instead.
Yeah.
So you got two, right? Okay. You got like time dates or whatever.
Yeah, or give it enough room so you can put stuff in between or whatever. But that kind
So
of
like for my little app, I just have the index and I pull the index. Right.
And then if like I need, if I need the whole, full-fledged record, that back in.
So, okay,
So I'm doing the searching and stuff. Yeah, because of that search does not scale.
It's kind of proof for us. And that's what they're saying, that you should check the blog post, I think, the blog post about creating your own index. So that from the stuff you want to search, you just set the references somewhere so that the data set you have to pull back is more manageable. And then from there, you can just use it. But it's not.
And there's nothing to prevent you from having like a, node running on some instance somewhere. That's just actually looking for requests for searches, and that's holding the index. So you don't have to have the index in the client.
Yeah.
So you could have your own essential server off to the side performing those duties.
Yep, that's one really nice thing about parts, although they're not real time. They have this concept of cloud code, which is basically that as well. You can run code in their cloud with certain callbacks. Like those callbacks I was talking about, I do with the clients, they give that to you in the back end. So I could do that.
Right.
So now I really don't have to have another solution out there, like pretty much search index or whatever. But yeah, pretty awesome.
And I gotta mention, because Firebase has been thinking for like over a year. We got a search coming around the corner.
I think it's probably harder than they.
Yeah, because they can't deliver in real time.
I've been playing with NoSQL quite a bit in Direct. I use Word.net Shop, so I use MongoDB, DF, kind of joining stuff together.
Okay.
I relied on the DF stuff out of the box, right? We're 7.5 minutes. Now, I'm like, this is nuts. Write my own JSON and shove it into my query in MongoDB. $500.
Yeah, you gotta use the same strategy that we're talking about, where you basically create your own index.
Yeah.
Or just use something else to index it.
Just how it builds that stuff. NoSQL. I love aspects of NoSQL. Like, searches.
Yeah, turns out SQL's pretty awesome. But
turns out.
But there are things that, like you said, it's nice, especially for prototyping. But I hate that. When people say, "Oh, it's great for prototyping," it's a pejorative.
Yeah.
It's like a.
That means it's not real ready.
Yeah, it's a euphemism for, well, I would never use that. Or that's the point. That's been said about Rails for years. But just write tools for the job, and not everybody's no silver bullet. You have to work around these limitations. I mean, there are tons of companies out there using Mongo and other databases as their backend.
Yep.
That's my part.
Yeah.
Are people making millions?
Yeah. If you make money on it, it works.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Thanks, man. Good presentation.
Thanks for coming.
Are recycling somewhere?
Yeah, all the way against that far wall.
That was awesome, man. Thanks for coming out.
It was such a fun thing to listen to. From Meetup.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, it's, I mean, almost the subject of the program that I know about. And oh, my background basically 12 years of selling cars over the internet. Very young way back then. Here with one thing or another on my website. Small. Yeah, and then I went, same security, and we get change data on our cars or on the books and all that stuff. And then I'm like, what? I want to get the visual side of it either. I want really obviously do it, but I learned. But at least I do that, and so but in the case, you know, I didn't look back, but now I'm going, you got the right mindset, but what you're doing, I mean,
Whoops. Probably want to turn the stream off, huh? Should have done that like 10 minutes ago.
so